Dawson, he's an antisocial criminal I'm sure many of us have seen in our lives. I mean, just look at him. The hair, the eyes, the posture, all of it. Just take it in. I'm not trying to be mean or bully or belittle him or anything like that, but this is such an archetypal character we have all seen in our own lives. He was featured on the Dr. Phil show, and I'm just going to be blunt. I don't take that show seriously at all. But this guest that came on the show, he's very useful to examine and analyze in my opinion, and I'll give you my thoughts on him. Dawson is a 15-year-old boy and the youngest of 4, an adolescent that has actually committed many illegal acts such as drug distribution, stealing cars and guns, and even breaking into houses. Is there anything special about this behavior? No, not at all. If I told you that he was raised in poor conditions, had no father, he had a bad influence in his life, you wouldn't think anything about it. It's just normal, it's typical behavior at this point. And the very interesting part about all of this is that he had parents. He had a mother, he had a father, and he grew up in what appears to be a suburban middle-class household who had a stable income. The type of upbringing you wouldn't expect this from. Many people believe that poverty causes criminal acts, maybe a bad environment, maybe a lack of father, but he has none of those. And he still commits the acts. In fact, more than anything, he's admiring gang members.
Dawson's become really fascinated with guns.
He's creating this gangster persona.
The parents actually believe, though, that this is caused due to the fact that they moved their locations. They moved from maybe a suburban area to a more urban, unsafe area with people to influence his life. That this had an impact on him. This caused him to imitate and aspire to becoming what he envisioned in his mind to be a gangster. Again, very odd behavior for somebody like him. You wouldn't expect this from a perfectly fine household. But as we'll be getting into the video, you'll understand clearly that there's nothing odd about this at all. And for this, I had to watch the entire video. Firstly, we need to examine the personality.
Now, Dawson recently ran away twice, stealing his aunt's minivan and speeding at 110 miles an hour while smoking marijuana with a 13-year-old girl.
All of this shows that he is disagreeable because he doesn't listen to his parents, the criminal behavior reveals lower conscientiousness, and he doesn't fear anybody, which indicates lower neuroticism. However, it is key to understand that having these personality traits does not make one simply commit criminal behavior. It's a combination of things. The personality is required, but it isn't what causes it. Other factors need to be taken into consideration, leading us to his parents. Now, his parents, they believe that it was caused due to the fact that they moved from locations and it introduced them to an unhealthy environment where they idolized gangsters and criminals and they glorified these terrible actions. But they're leaving a couple of things out, as the siblings' perspective on this matter was a little bit different.
When we spoke with these older brothers and sisters, they gave the following statements. As a kid, everything was handed to Dawson. He never had to work for anything, whereas I had chores growing up. Dawson has never understood that there are consequences for his actions. My parents wouldn't follow through with consequences because Dawson knew how to manipulate the situation. Growing up, Dawson had it easy. I think part of why he is the way he is today is because he didn't have enough boundaries growing up in combination with his strong personality. That's from Jessica.
Dawson was the exception in his family. The others turned out perfectly fine. They didn't have these issues. Reason being that they had that fatherly influence. Let me explain. Part of the fatherly influence would be holding them accountable for their actions. If you do something wrong, you're going to be punished for it. There are going to be consequences for it. He didn't have that fatherly influence that made him bear the consequences for his actions. And simply being told no, that he couldn't have something that he desired. He was babied and he got away scot-free with things. Dawson didn't have this fatherly influence. He didn't get exposed to reality, how the world operated. It came too late. They never applied this control over him in his childhood, and only recently started to actually do it when his desires shifted and got out of hand, resulting in neither Dawson himself nor his parents being able to exert control over him and restrain him as they should as his parents. It was fine and manageable when what he was desiring was within their reach, was perfectly fine and legitimate. It wasn't illegal. But when that shifted towards gang culture, idolizing theft and drug dealing, then this became a noticeable problem towards them. It had been lurking underneath the entire time and it finally manifested. But there is something we need to acknowledge. Why specifically does he admire and idolize gang members and criminal behavior? Young disagreeable boys, they need a strong, healthy, powerful father figure that they can respect and admire. Dawson's father, however, he did not play this role. Again, he did not fulfill his fatherly role, which was to administer those consequences and be a powerful force in his life to expose him to reality. He aided in the role of the nurturer, and he neglected his duties. Otherwise, if he had that strong, powerful, healthy father figure in his life that influenced him, he would have aspired to be like his father. That's what he would have idolized. That is what he would have glorified. He would have exercised that sound judgment, and he would have acknowledged that it was going against his parents' wishes, that his parents wouldn't have agreed with that, nor accepted it. He knew it was illegal. He knew his parents didn't like it, but they were not respectable in his eyes. Why was he going to listen to them? He had nothing to respect, aspire to, or fear. In the previous video discussing fatherless behavior, it was highlighted that if a father was weaker than his son, he couldn't hope to control him. He would just do whatever he wants. He would assert his will over him. What the father desired wouldn't have mattered. Because again, it's not a matter if there is a father present. It's if he fulfills his role effectively. And the video concludes with him being confronted with a real gangster. And to be completely honest, this part infuriated me. Dawson, he wasn't raised properly. He needs correction, and I wouldn't even be mad if he had gone to prison or jail. But they didn't help him by telling him that admiring gang members was wrong. How about you tell him why he's admiring gang members, Aren't you a clinical psychologist, Phil? Tell him why he looks up to gangsters. It takes more than simply hanging out with the wrong crowd of people to admire these things. I'm sure if he hanged out with a crowd of nerds that admired people like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or something like that, he wouldn't have cared. He would have just shoved them out. He wouldn't have hanged out with those people. He decided to join their little group. He could have simply walked away. Why don't they explain that to him? In my opinion, he admired the gangsters because they're more risk takers. They're assertive, they're aggressive, they're ambitious, which aligns with Dawson's natural inclinations towards these traits because of his personality. That is what he tried to implement when he envisioned this gangster. It was an act to try and live that out in his life. He drove so fast, he held a gun, he didn't care what his parents thought. It was an act to live those things out. These are bad things, yes. Tell him it is bad, but explain, why does he admire them? Explain these traits that he's naturally drawn to. Instead, what they should have done is take out those traits that are not inherently bad in themselves and reintroduce them in a healthy, good, powerful role model in his life. Kind of like the very thing he lacked in his life, You can't simply tell him to not do something because it is bad. He's naturally drawn to it. He's drawn to it from his heart. Yes, remove the bad influence, but leave him with something. Don't leave him with this hole that he has to fill. When you're removing that junk food, don't simply take out the cupcakes. Introduce some things like eggs, fruits. Introduce some healthy food. Otherwise, he will just starve to death. As for the criminal behavior, though, what is to be done about this? That is the question. But it's answered very simply because understand, none of this would have happened if he held his son accountable and he didn't take up his wife's role of the nurturer. He should have ingrained those consequences for his misbehaviors. They did not do this with him, but they did it with their previous children that turned out perfectly fine. They didn't always get what they wanted. They had that father that was in their lives that told them no, that held them accountable for their actions, and it caused them to learn self-restraint. It ingrains this healthy amount of fear into their minds. They know that if they do something wrong, they will have to live with those consequences. Dawson didn't fear consequences because he never dealt with them in his life. He never knew consequences. He could just do whatever he wanted and he'd get away. If he's told no, he'll find some way around it and just get it. Again, if you fail to instill these things in your children, they may not become deviants like Dawson, but they'll manifest in some other ugly way depending on their personality. Anyways, that is the end of this video. I hope it helped. I hope you learned a lot from this, and maybe you can understand yourself a bit better if you didn't have that strong masculine father figure in your life. It's very unfortunate, these cases. But the best thing we can do is try and fix ourselves, and to make sure these things don't happen again. That is all. Take care.